initial success. Now, we do know about interleague play and blah, 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 but, because of his injuries, he hasn't participated in interleague play as much as some of the other pitchers have, and, you only see so many teams, and even though the guys go from league to league, I think Kerry Wood may have a distinct advantage this year with a good majority of the hitters because they're not going to know what he's got. They haven't seen him. They haven't hit against him before.
Absolutely, that's a great point. On the other hand, I think switching leagues doesn't affect closers as much as it does starters because Kerry Wood could go through a series and maybe save or maybe appear in 2 of the 3 games in a series, but if he goes 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, or something like that, you could go through a series and some of these opposing hitters might not get a chance to see him. So I think, switching leagues doesn't affect a reliever or a closer as much as it would affect a starting pitcher where almost no matter what, you're going to go through the lineup twice to where people will be able to see you more often. But as a closer, you don't face that many hitters. Hopefully it won't affect them too much.
Yeah, so like I said, we'll keep an eye on that. That's one of those things we'll follow. I'm sure you'll keep us up to date on that.
Yeah.
If he blows the first 4 stage, you're going to be coming on MILB radio talking about Kerry Wood. You'll probably be yelling at me, "What the crap? What the heck are you giving us this freaking piece of crap for?" That's we'll have to keep an eye on that. So, anyways, 646-652-2962. I didn't even give the number that you can call us if you want to come on and talk some baseball tonight. MILBradio.com. Anything that you want to talk about baseball related, kind of a little bit of a pro baseball talk there, MLB talk there. But we're going to switch gears now, and I wanted to talk some about the Rule 5 draft that took place. And just to kind of remind people, we discussed the rules of the Rule 5, Rule 4, all that during the draft period in June when they had the amateur draft. But just kind of remind people what the Rule 5 draft is all about. Rule 5 draft is, for those who don't know, teams can draft minor leaguers and other organizations if they're not on the 40-man roster. And this is to prevent major league teams from hoarding top talent and not bringing them up to the majors just to keep them from playing for another team. So they instituted this rule that you can draft somebody if they're not on a 40-man roster, but there's certain elements to that you have to follow as a major league team. If you draft somebody out of somebody else's minor league system via a Rule 5 draft, then you are required to put them on your 40-man roster immediately. You have to have a space on your 40-man roster prior to the Rule 5 draft. Otherwise, you can't even participate in it. You have to put them on the 40-man roster immediately, and then they have to spend the majority of the season, I believe it is, or a certain number of games they have to actually spend the whole season on the 25-man roster. And so it's kind of, you're taking a risk. You're saying when you draft somebody out of Rule 5 that you are going to play, or this player is going to be on your team. So that's why sometimes you don't see a lot of moves Rule 5, but we did have 21 players selected in the Rule 5 draft this year, starting with the, and by the way, the draft order is done the same way as the regular draft, which is actually considered, the amateur draft is actually Rule 4. It's done the same way, worst team, worst record gets first pick, and so on and so on. So the Washington Nationals actually got the first pick, and they stole, and I like to say steal because that's exactly what they did. The Washington Nationals drafted from the Cincinnati Reds a guy by the name of Terrell Young, who played the majority of his season with Sarasota. Actually did spend some time with the Dayton Dragons as well. Last year, his minors, he's a pitcher. He went 2-5 with an ERA of 2.88 in 43 games. Now they say this kid is a top grade prospect, but the numbers really don't show it. I mean, his strikeout total in 59 and third innings was 47, with only 28 walks. Now, but it's just interesting because, and not that Washington has anything to lose. They've got where they're at. They could take a shot on a kid like this and throw him on their roster. But this guy's got to play in the major leagues next year. He's got to at least be on the 25-man roster, and that's one of those things where you look at and you wonder how teams are going to make that transition, and if they really do feel high on these guys. Now, if for some chance Terrell Young does not, they don't put him on the roster, he doesn't make the team for whatever reason, then they have to send him back to the Reds. So that's kind of how it works here with any team. So Terrell Young, now Seattle with the number 2 pick. Now that's, like I said, if a team did not have an open spot on the 40-man, they couldn't draft. But Seattle picked up a guy out of the Yankees organization, played for Trent most of the year, Reggie Corona. And Reggie played, like I said, with Trent last year. He hit 274 as a second baseman. Hit 274 in 129 games. He had 457 plate appearances with 3 home runs, 39 RBIs, 24 stolen bases. His on-base percentage was .345. Once again, not big-time numbers for somebody you would expect to actually be on a 25-man roster. So I just kind of giving you 2 examples that kind of jumped out at me, and I wanted to ask Napper or Elwood or anybody out there who's listening, 646-652-2962, do you believe a team, should they take a chance on a guy like this, or do you think that they should just pass on these Rule 5s? I mean, have you heard, there's a lot of good examples of good Rule 5 draft picks and whatnot, but, I mean, what do you think, Napper?
Well, I think it's less of a risk for teams, like the Nationals, the Mariners, like you said. They're not expected to contend next year to begin with. So I think it's a little bit less of a risk for teams like that to go ahead and draft a guy. If they make the team out of spring training, they can put him on their roster, get them some major league experience, and see if they can contribute on a major league level down the line. You don't really see the teams that are going to compete, the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Dodgers, those type of teams who compete year in and year out. You don't see them ever making, drafting players in the Rule 5 draft because they're more of a risk. They pretty much have their 25-man rosters set through their own player development or mostly free agency, and they're going to compete for division championship year in and year out. So it's more of a risk for those people, for those teams to take a guy and have to put him on the major league roster for the entire year.
Well, that's just the other point to make, to remind everybody that they don't have to stay on for the season. If they make it, if they hold that place on the roster for the entire season, then after that season they go back to their normal options wherever they're at, and they can be optioned back to AAA or AA or whatever. So yeah, I can see your point about a team like that, or just kind of saying, we'll just take the risk. And Elwood in the chat room just mentions that you're never going to get anywhere playing it safe. And that's true. That's a very good point. That you got to take a chance. These guys have nothing. These teams have nothing to lose. I mean, the Nationals, the Mariners. I mean, come on. And I'm really surprised that the Mariners that they didn't hire Ryan Sandberg. I thought that was a lock. I thought for sure he'd at least get an interview over there. And I thought for sure. I figured to put people in the seats that they would want to do that, but apparently they decided to go a different direction. But that's another story. But a team, those type of teams, it's definitely worth a risk for them to maybe steal somebody else's top prospect in their organization. I just find it kind of